This is Kreskin. Of course, you know me as the amazing Kreskin, and this is my weekly episode of What's on My Mind. It's a very special episode, folks, which I've thought about considerably in the past day or two, having learned of the passing of a very special person in my life, not only friend, but collaborator and supporter, and that's Regis Philbin. It's hard to believe that he is no longer with us when you think of the thousands of hours, the record number of hours that he presented in broadcasting. And insight into him, well, you already, if you've seen him, understand it and will appreciate it, and that is that unlike most people in the public eye, Regis was exactly the same off camera as he was on camera. In fact, he had a gift of his multitude of gifts, but the main one, of course, was that of communication. But he had an ability which is disappearing in broadcasting today with the multitude of shows. Now you can watch 10,000 shows a day if you're tired, many more if you wish otherwise. But to be able to come on the air, in the hour programs you saw him with Kelly and on his partners were, there were a couple others, but and talk about not some scripted suggestion, but something that happened the night before or that morning, because he walked to work. We used to kid each other. I used to see down the street where he'd walk back to the studio from where he was living in New York, and something may have happened during the meal or that he heard or what have you, and he would simply recount it. But he made it extraordinarily interesting, and everyone looking in could identify with it. He knew how a person thought and how the listener thought, because he also realized that most of the viewers were not men. They were at a work job, but it was homemakers, housewives, students that had turned on the television. It was a remarkable gift because what he talked about and the way he spoke about it left it extremely interesting. Now, my experiences with him go far back through the years. As a matter of fact, I have to share this with you because this is my last appearance with Regis. I'm with his wife, Joy. It's my 105th appearance with Regis. And in latter years, he was appearing in theaters, in concerts hall with his wife or by himself, and simply recounting and talking about his career, which everyone found absolutely fascinating. Well, I was in the audience. He knew I was going to be there, and out of nowhere he introduced me and said, "Kreskin, would you come down here for a moment, or as long as you wish?" And as I walked down the aisle, I gave it some thought, put my hand on someone in the audience sitting in one of the aisle seats, and said to the woman, "You have a watch on, you take it out, what have you." And I walked down to the front where the stage was. Regis came off stage and stood downstairs where he was at the orchestra level, the same level of the downstairs, the audience. I gave him a watch and said, "Regis, look at it. It was a regular watch. It reset the time, he reset the time," and so forth. And it didn't matter. And I had the woman in the audience take the watch, look at it, turn it face down, and start rotating the dials and stop whenever she wished to. The only thing I requested, and Regis didn't know what I was going to do because he trusted me. He had known me long enough that however I was going to work, he'd run with it and something interesting would come out of it. When she decided to stop, I told her to look at the watch but show the face of it to no one. At that moment, Regis looked at the watch I gave him. He announced the time. He turned the face of the watch down and started turning the dials. I said, "Give me a few minutes, Regis, to pick up her thoughts. And then when you feel like stopping, stop." And suddenly he stopped. And I said, "Why'd you stop there?" He said, "Because you told me to." Now I said nothing, but after all the years of working together, he knew that my mental impressions could be picked up and he received them. Well, you guessed it. The time that she set the watch to, when he read the time, it was only 3.5 to 4 minutes off. He had literally stopped at the time she was thinking of. But to give you further insight into the wild experiences we've had through the years, because I'd walk on the show having been invited maybe hours before because someone wasn't showing up. I was in the area and they said, would you come on? So there was no dress rehearsal, there was no walkthrough. I remember the time when I was heavily criticized by one of the production people on the show. After the show, made a big scene of it, and Regis would often call me at night or later in the day after the program and say, yeah, I heard what so-and-so said. He didn't ever say anything negative. He never disparaged anyone, but we chuckled about it. You see, the producer of the show was very upset with what I did because I had a group of people come up on stage. It may have been a dozen, it may have been more people. And using my influence to influence others, and Regis is standing there, they closed their eyes. And when they opened their eyes, they couldn't see Regis. They looked, they thought he had left and what have you. So you can imagine the drama of my turning Regis into a ghost. He never forgot this, because when he picked up the table, a couple of women almost screamed because it looked like the table was floating. When he picked up a magazine on the table and walked, he says, Kreskin, he would tell me this later on, he says, I never scared anybody quite like this, even in my Halloween days. And slowly this scenario grew, because these people were total strangers. I never met them before. And when it was over, they closed their eyes. I counted to 5 and clapped my hands, opened their eyes, and suddenly Regis was there. They thought he had just walked on. Well, the production assistant of the program was furious. And I used hypnotism. I dared to hypnotize these people on the show. I didn't know if he was undergoing therapy, but my opinion is he needed it badly. So what? Hypnotists had appeared on many shows, but the irony was that part of the message of my life is I can do anything that we associate with hypnosis without putting anybody into a trance in any way, shape, or form. And sometimes when Regis and I would meet, he'd say, oh, remember the sour grapes of so-and-so? And you put these people in some trance. Kreskin, are any of them still in a trance? Because that was the beauty of Regis, no matter where he was, no matter who he was with. He could look at the lighter side and see humor. Now let me tell you a story that's been commented upon a number of times. And maybe now the true story should come out. Yes, I don't want to forget this, because I have a great regard for this man, Regis Philbin. His wife is as lovely a person as you'd ever want to know. But his support of me, his belief in me, his loyalty remained with me throughout my career and our lives. But let me tell you, earlier in broadcasting, Regis's first major show that was seen nationally was with a gentleman named Joey Bishop. Yes, the Joey Bishop show, and there you have a picture of Regis, who was Joey's announcer and support, like Ed McMahon was a support to Johnny Carson, and then Joey Bishop and yours truly. I appeared on this program with Regis on the Joey Bishop show many, many times. I can't even begin to tell you the times I was called into Joey's office during the day, and Joey would say to me, Kreskin, do you think you could do something else? You want to fill some more? He wouldn't even ask me what I was going to do, but he was intrigued. So Joey and Regis worked together. Well, that's what's interesting, because I found out years later that even though they were competing, they were on opposite networks, and Joey's ratings were much lower than this other person. Johnny Carson, who was the host of The Tonight Show, whenever I was on the Joey Bishop show, would quietly turn in his apartment, as his wife was watching, on to Joey Bishop and watch the program. So Johnny became familiar with me long before I met him. But there's another story that you need to know about. And in a lunch that Regis and I had as we'd sometimes sit and talk and quietly reflect on things. I loved talking to him. We got to talking about years later, decades in the past, the Joey Bishop show. And I talked about the incident, which has been mentioned a number of times the past couple of days, when they are recounting on different talk shows and news shows Regis Philbin's past. How, in a huff and with ill feelings or what have you, that they don't know the story behind this, Regis walked off of Joey's show. Walked off of Joey's show. And while this is not generally known, let me explain to you the reason. What the disagreement was, what the bitterness was, and why he returned 3 or 4 days later with not much comment. Joey and Regis were walking to the studio. They often did it. It was night, and Joey, as Regis explained to me, seemed a little bit preoccupied. He often was before a show. He wasn't sure what he was going to talk about. And he said to Regis, "You know, Reg, Johnny Carson has all the viewers. I don't have any ratings at all. Not that many people are watching us on my show." And Regis said to me, and I know Regis how he would speak, he'd say, "Joey, just understand something. You're doing a fabulous job. You're highly professional. It's great working with you, and the show is working." And Joey said, "Yeah, Regis. Yeah, but nobody's watching it." And then, as they approached the doors of the studio, there's no one out there waiting for them, did it every night. Before he opened the door, he stopped and put his hand on Regis and said, "Wait a minute, Regis. I have an idea. Tonight, you walk off the show." Regis said, "What? Yeah, walk off the show. This will create a lot of talk. Well, picture this nighttime show. And as all the programs start, there comes the host out. You know, Regis has introduced him voiceover, and here is Joey Bishop. And Joey's standing there doing his monologue or talking about things. And as you're watching the show, you're thinking, what's going on? You see Regis walking out into the scene. You never saw the announcer of the show unless Ed McMahon was going to do something with Carson or they were going to do some stunt together. And you see Regis walking out to the right of Joey, but not standing next to him. Oh no, standing somewhat behind him. And you're thinking, does Joey know about this? Does he know what's going on? And as Joey's speaking, as we all have in television, and 5.5 years of my series, I would stand and talk and gesture and maybe sometimes allude to my audience on my left, audience on my right, and suddenly Joey looks and he sees Regis Philbin standing there. And Joey says, "Regis, is everything all right?" And Regis stands there and slowly looks down towards the stage and says, "Joey, I'm leaving the show." "What, Regis?" "I'm leaving the show." Joey says, "Is there anything I can do?" Didn't ask why. "Is there anything I can do?" And Regis said, "No, Joey, I made a decision. Tonight, I'm leaving the show." And slowly on camera, Regis walks off the stage. And you can imagine not only us viewers at home, but the studio audience thinking, what in God's name took place? And also imagine how stunned the production staff, all the people on the Joey Bishop show were. They couldn't figure out what the hell happened. And of course, I can imagine 3 or 4 days later when Regis came back, I'm sure Joey said, well, Regis, it worked. Yeah, there was no feud. There was no disagreement. It's just a touch of the ad-lib that Joey Bishop thought would cause interest in the program. Sometimes, folks, we learn the history of scenarios much, much later. But it's interesting, the rumors and the interpretations that take place before. So the bitterness, the argument, was all hallucinated by altered memories. That's a story that you're amongst the first to know about. But I have to tell you, folks, I could go on for hours telling you the experiences I had with Regis Philbin, because he truly was one of a kind. The market and the setting of broadcasting today would not lend itself as easily, not easily, but effectively, for a person to come through and achieve this kind of mass interaction. Regis, rest in peace. My heart goes to your family. I'm thrilled about what you've done regarding the University of Notre Dame. And I expect to see you again. I'm not sure when. I haven't predicted that part of my life. But for the time being, take care. And all of you folks, to be continued. Be the good Lord willing.